now. Whoa. I'm Rodd Duff, your host.
And I'm producer Barbie.
And together,
we bring you our podcast,
Insights and Straight Talk. And with that, producer Barbie and I are out. And good morning to you. I still love that tune coming in. We got a couple of good songs that come into the intro. I already see a couple of people jumping on already. Welcome. And good morning and welcome to Insights and Straight Talk. I'm Rodd Duff, your host, along with the ever-present producer Barbie. Before we go anywhere, okay, I want to give a big high five to a couple of our sponsors and partners. Without that kind of thing going on, to these organizations, we don't have those voices. I just wanted to shout out to the Mangum City Library, where I am here. This is supporting what's coming up in the Regeneration School Project. Thank you guys for standing for access, learning, and community, not just in words, but in action. To Leaf Lab, thank you for providing the education that it can be practical and rigorous and directly connected to the real problems that matter in the real world. And to our strategic partners, the Regeneration School Project and Voices at the Table, thank you for helping us build spaces where leadership, responsibility, and dialogue are taught early, practiced often, and treated as something we should pass forward and not hoard. This show doesn't exist without that ecosystem. So this gratitude is truly real. Now, let's talk about why today's conversation matters. Most people don't leave jobs because of the work. They leave because of leadership. They leave because expectations are unclear, because accountability is uneven, because culture says one thing, and yet behavior rewards something else. And the hardest truth to sit with is this: most workplace problems aren't caused by bad people. They're caused by leadership that was never intentionally taught. Think about it. Managers are trained to hit numbers. Founders are trained to scale, right? Supervisors are trained to enforce policies, but very few are trained to lead human beings. That gap shows up everywhere, right? Burnout, disengagement, quiet quitting, toxic culture, teams that look fine on paper, but feel broken on the inside. That's why today's guest really does matter. Jesan Sorrells doesn't approach leadership as a slogan. I hope I got that name pronounced correctly there. I forgot to ask you. Thumbs up or thumbs down, Jesan? Oh, medium. Okay, it's somewhere in there. Okay, we'll when the professional comes in, we can correct a few things that I'm starting off here. Or a seminar. He didn't approach it like a seminar. He approaches it as a daily practice, right? A practice that shows up in systems, incentives, and what leaders choose to tolerate. When no one is watching. His work sits at the intersection of leadership, literature, media, and organizational life. And that matters because some of the most enduring lessons about leadership didn't come from the business books, right? They come from great stories. Stories about power, responsibility, failure, and character. Everyone, here's the part I want everyone watching to hear very clearly. Leadership isn't a title. It isn't authority. It isn't control. Leadership is what people experience when you're not in the room. And culture isn't what's written on the wall, right? It's what survives in the system. Most cultures aren't intentionally built. They're actually accidentally inherited. So today's conversation isn't about tearing anyone down. It isn't about claiming agency or so if you're a manager, a founder, or an educator, a supervisor, or you just want to, if you just somebody who wants to lead better, that's what you've experienced. This conversation is for you. If you're watching live, bring your questions, especially the uncomfortable ones, because clarity is a form of care. Now I don't want to say your name. Welcome to Inside and Straight Talk. Hold on, I hit the wrong one. I almost left the studio there, brother. Sorry, a couple of errors there, but those are not uncommon. So we're off and running here. How are you, my friend? How are you?
Good. How you doing, Rod? It's great to be here on Insights and Straight Talk. Great to be sitting here with you and just chatting a little bit, chopping up the cheddar about leadership. So let's get into it.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got already a couple hundred people on. We did drop LinkedIn. That's too bad. We go out to X, to YouTube, to LinkedIn, to Instagram, and Facebook. So
beautiful.
Those are the things that we're going to look at a little bit later. But so tell your story. What's up? How did you drive this direction?
Sure. So just so folks can get a sort of a flavor of who I am and of what I'm about. As Rod said, my name is Jesan Sorrells. I am the founder of Leadership Toolbox, which is an organization that is a division of HSCT Publishing, and we really focus on leadership development, leadership training. We work with small and medium-sized business leaders. We also work with, civic leaders. We work with religious leaders. Work with anybody who's in a leadership position of any kind, in order to help them become, an intentional leader. My journey started, probably 20 years ago, back when I was in higher education. I didn't really start as a child wanting to go into this, but I did start as a child seeing that there were a lot of things around me that weren't correct, right? And that I wanted to fix, right? And so
being curious, right? Being curious.
Exactly. And so I've taken the tools that I do well. I tell my wife I only do really three things well in this world. Everything else I'm a B student at. I think well, I read well, and I talk well. And so I decided to, starting in higher education and building teams and really working with people, I really began to see that at first conflict, I thought, was the way to sort of get into everything, because everybody's in conflict, in one form or another. But then from conflict, I began to realize that as we moved more and more upstream, that leadership was a bigger challenge. And so over the course of the last 15 years, I've really worked with teams. I've worked with, like I said, individual leaders through coaching, development, training, of course, my own podcast that I have, the Leadership Lessons from the Great Books. And that has led me to what Rod mentioned in the beginning, it really exploring the intersection of leadership and literature, because reading a great book and trying to understand leadership from a great book, usually the kinds of books that you might have fallen asleep trying to read in high school and that are probably in that library that Rod is in, reading those books are actually better than trying to read and understand yet another business book. The kind of business book that you either have given to you or you put on your shelf and you read it one time and you never revisit it and you never apply, you never execute, but you go, oh, that was a really good idea.
Yeah, that is a very it's a critical and potentially dry subject. That's why the storytelling concept of what you're about is so interesting. It's like I kind of feel about this show, right? There's the what I call the interview style, or so to speak, or the conversation style, where you're really developing pictures and of the mind, because that's how people connect, right?
Exactly. And narrative, story structure.
Love that word.
persuasion. Most of these things are things that we're so familiar with. So Dan Pink wrote a book years ago where basically he said, we are all sales folks, right? And I've seen this in my own life. I have 4 children. All 4 of my children have attempted to sell me on all kinds of things throughout the entire course of years. And sometimes they make the sale, sometimes they don't. And this is the same way with leaders, right? We're always selling. We're either selling ourselves, we're selling our vision, we're selling goals, we're selling benchmarks and outcomes, or at a very practical level, we're selling just getting through the day. And we need as many tools as we can possibly have in our toolbox to get ourselves where we need to go in this world today. Or we could be like Homer Simpson,
selling vision too, right? Yes, it is. You're selling vision. You're selling Duff Spear. You're selling
Absolutely.
vision too, aren't you?
You are selling vision. And by the way, I've been really thinking about this lately. Stumbled across an idea reading a book last night, and our visions really come in 2 forms, right? They come in a constrained vision, which is consumed with the idea of the trade-offs and the tragedies that are part of the human existence and how to make the best out of what we have. And then we have an unconstrained vision. And an unconstrained vision is what inspires people. It's what leads to charismatic leadership. It's what leads to inspirational leadership. But it's also what can lead folks, quite frankly, over the cliff. And in times of chaos, an unrestrained vision of leadership or an unrestrained vision of the future can take leaders and followers off the cliff. And we've been in a time of chaos.
What do you mean by unrestrained? What do you mean by unrestrained leadership? What does that look like?
Yeah. So unrestrained leadership looks like, I think of the phrase from the French philosopher Jean-Jacques Rousseau, right? Man is born free, but everywhere he is in chains, right? And so the unrestrained vision of leadership basically says, if we just released people from the vagaries of human life, maybe even through technology, then they will live out their creative juices in all kinds of manners and ways. But the problem is human beings are limited, and those constraints are there for a reason. And an unconstrained vision uses a tool like technology in order to release people from their constraints, but then doesn't realize that it creates a whole bunch of other unintended consequences further on down the road.
So at that point, you're creating chaos, not clarity. I mean, you're moving from clarity into chaos. So unconstrained moves. We talk about, that comparison is so basically perfect. Chaos or clarity, and that's what you're referring to there.
In my book, which you could pick up on Amazon if you're so inclined. 12 rules.
Please tell that information. Go ahead, and at the end, I also want you to put in your contact information. We've done like 470 some shows now in a year and a half, and I don't always get to the comment sections on the thing. So if they have your direct information, I'm a one-man band, so if they have your direct information, that'll help us both. And I assume you're okay with that.
Oh,
just
absolutely.
sometime before the show, because I'm gonna put it in at the end of the comments, so they don't have to go search. You know what I mean? There'll probably be 20 or so. All right, go ahead, sir.
Yeah, absolutely. So a couple of things. So in my book, 12 Rules for Leaders, which came out in 2022, I wrote that there is a simple, not model, but methodology for communicating around leadership. And that simple methodology is what I call the 3 C's methodology. Leaders need to communicate with clarity. That's the first C. Candor. That's the second C. But then the third C is courage, what Brene Brown calls the heart word, right? Now, we often associate courage with military bravery or being a firefighter, right? Like my oldest daughter, she's a volunteer firefighter right now, right? And so we associate courage with the act of running into a fire. But quite frankly, in times of, to your point, Rodd, chaos, courage is the thing we actually need more of. along with clarity and candor. Because
Yep.
when we are facing challenges as a leader, when we're facing systems that don't work, or followers that are recalcitrant and don't want to do what we want them to do, or even what we need them to do in order to move the project forward, it can feel like a 5-alarm fire all the time.
Recalcitrant. Tell me that word.
Yeah, resistant, not wanting to go along,
Okay.
just saying no.
All right. That's what I thought. Just want to make sure. I told you I'm that safety net.
Yeah, Bartleby's. Think of Herman Melville, Bartleby's Scrivener, right? I would prefer not to, right? In that old story from back in the day. By the way, folks, I'm going to drop a bunch of literary references in here the entire time I'm talking. Go look up these books. They are great. They will encourage you. They will edify you, and they will make you a better leader if you read these books. So anyway, we need to really focus on that courage piece in order to, well, and also the clarity and candor piece, in order to develop the kinds of cultures that we want in order to restore what I see as quite frankly the next golden age in America. And I do believe we are on the cusp of something better. I can smell it coming. I can smell it coming.
Hey, do you consider candor as authenticity? Are those same words in your description here?
Yes. So authenticity.
We use it a lot on the show, is why I'm asking. That's why I'm asking.
So authenticity is how we show up in all of the ways we show up, right?
Right.
Candor is how we speak. It's how we verbalize our authenticity, right? So in a world of social media where words are cheap very often,
yes.
candor is very expensive.
Good point. Okay. Oh, that's well framed. That is awesome. That's a compliment to authenticity. I mean, but at the next level, because it's more of a communication, which is critical, right?
Exactly.
And what you're saying, interesting. The words of communication are only 8%. Somewhere in that number, I may be off a little bit, but 8% of the actual effectiveness of that communication. The rest of it is an inflection, candor, and how you're showing up to them and how much you're like them, and creating that vision, because that's what leaders do. They create, and the people, everybody else is the backbone of the company. It's like the country. You have the great middle class, and then you have the government officials. And if those aren't, a company. You have the people in the workforce, and you have the people who have the vision. They both have to work together and work well, or it doesn't work, right? It pitters.
Well, and I would say also that what we've been experiencing.
Pitters is a technical term.
It is a technical. I like the technical term, pitter patter, right? The pitter patter of little feet running away from a problem.
Oh yeah. There you go. Good tie.
One of the things that we see in our country over the last quarter century, right? And this is why I say we're coming out of it. One of the things we've seen is at the center where real people live, in the real parts of the country, that the people that aren't perpetually online, right? Or aren't actually looking for the next hack. Those people who are consistently getting up, doing the work, right? They are delivering the groceries, or picking up the trash, or building the houses. Those are the people that are creating, and quite frankly, are the ones that are laying the rails for how leadership will be thought about far beyond their own lifetimes. And one of the reasons I do the podcast in the way that I do, and one of the reasons I talk in the way that I talk, is because those folks deserve to have their faith rewarded, quite frankly. They deserve to have their leadership acts rewarded. And those are the people who can build out a new system based on clarity, candor, and courage. They can create the next generation of leaders. Okay. They just have to believe it.
And how? And how does that correlate? I want to get to some of these questions in a minute, but folks, be patient. We're having a good time here, man.
We are rolling.
This is some really, it's interesting because, like I said, we've done, it's over 470. It's wherever we are on the actual number. But so I talk to a lot of experts, and this is what I love to do. This is my mission now. And what's so interesting is you have different angles it's like what the Democratic and Republican Party used to be in my dad's time, where they're both getting to the answer, but they have different directions in how they're doing it, right? That was what built our country. That system helped build our country. It's a whole different thing going on right now. That's a different story. But at the end of the day, you've got to have that. You've got to have that clarity, right?
You have to know what you stand for. You have to know
Yeah.
what your vision is. You have to know whether your vision is, you have to know about the assumptions underneath your vision, right? So one of the things that we are struggling with right now is that while we have real workplace issues that are occurring in all kinds of different workplaces, we have real workplace issues around identity. We have real workplace issues around meaning. We have real workplace issues around the value of work. We absolutely have real workplace issues. But we also have a set of assumptions underneath those issues that go quietly unquestioned. And my work is about taking literature, which is a very easy way to do this, and using those insights from literature to question those assumptions. And once you start questioning assumptions, then you can start questioning a vision. And then here's the important part. You don't just deconstruct the vision. You don't just question the assumptions. You say, what is the solution? What are we going to do next? How do we lay the rails for the next thing?
Define some of the assumptions that are not, just make sure I'm on the same path with you here. What would define some of those assumptions, and let's explore that. Let's hover right here for a minute, okay?
Yeah. So if you and I were sitting in a room together and you were talking with me, I know you said you were a one-man band, but let's say you had like 3 other people working with you, just a small team, right? And I'm sure you've been in this situation, right? And your small team is diverse, not just diversity of skin color or of gender, but diversity of thought, right? And they are committed to the goal. But you haven't actually articulated, and they're accomplishing benchmarks, by the way, but you haven't articulated a vision because you didn't think you needed to. The assumption exists there that, well, the vision is just there. Like they'll just know somehow.
Okay.
And that's an assumption.
So you're saying okay. I get that. So leadership, we talked about it early on. You're selling the vision. So if you didn't start a vision, and so now you're assuming that they're just going to, by observance or whatever, they're going to file in. I think we've all been there. Yes. File in and understand what the vision is. And you guys may be going like this, or something, maybe not so dramatic, but off.
Right. And you're on a team of 4 people. That's all you're on a team of, right?
Yeah.
Now imagine we go to scale. We go from 4 people to 8, right? We go from 8. Now, every time you scale in more people, your problem actually doesn't get better. Your problem actually gets worse, right? Because now, not only do you have people running around like whack-a-mole doing all kinds of things in your organization and in your culture, but you're playing whack-a-mole trying to figure out what exactly it is that people are doing. And I see this with leaders all the time because the basic assumption, to your point of, I'm just role modeling this and everybody should just watch me and just do it, doesn't work. Look, role modeling has its place in leadership, but role modeling without actually articulating what it is we're doing doesn't work. This is a great question. I love this. Can we talk about this one right
here?
Yeah,
there's actually several right where they belong right now.
Yep.
And this one, yes, this is Gerard. Go ahead and read it. Go ahead and read it.
Yeah. I love this question from Gerard. How can leaders spot their own blind spots early? This is an excellent question. So everybody.
And that's where you have to spot them. That's where you kind of have to spot them, because you talked about scale a second ago. At 4 people or whatever, smaller teams, you start recognizing there, because whatever the blind spot that's there is not going out to the team, right? That's the kind of the point, right?
Right, exactly. And And the way you spot blind spots early, because a leader can never spot blind spots on their own because they're blind, right? They just don't know, right? So you have to be
good point.
You have to be open to honest, truthful, and by the way, empathetic. I'm going to talk about empathy in a minute, but empathetic feedback. Now, in order to
From
hear
your team,
empathetic feedback,
from your team, you're talking about
from
now.
your team,
Okay.
from your team. But also, if you're really thinking about this holistically and organically, which I tend to be an organic
Okay.
coach and trainer and teacher and writer, you're going to get this feedback in a lot of different ways. And if you're if you're self-aware enough to recognize that you're going to have blind spots, you will seek out that feedback and you will look at feedback as a gift, no matter where it comes from, whether it comes from your family, comes from your wife or your husband or your partner who's watching you go through this leadership challenge, or even the people that you're working with who are in the trenches with you.
That is awesome. And it makes a lot of sense because normally you would just expect that to be coming from your boss, so to speak, and maybe a few people that you rely on in an inner circle, but really your life is holistic. So who you are, that it doesn't really change whether you're going out the door or coming back in, whether you're going off to work or coming back home. It's your similarities of this. Well, you're the same person with slight dissimilarities, mostly similar.
We put on a face when we go to work, right? We have this idea in sociology and in anthropology of exactly. I'm gonna adjust my collar. I'm gonna straighten my hair. I'm gonna make myself look good. I'm gonna go in there and I'm going to put on a show.
Right. The mask, I call it.
Exactly. You mentioned authenticity earlier, right? What people are craving is what people are craving from leaders is a closing of the gap between what people say they are and how people actually behave.
Great point.
They're craving the closing of that gap. And so I used to tell people when I was doing corporate training and development, a few years ago, that, if you ever see me walking around in my local grocery store, I won't say the brand here, but if you ever see me walk around my local grocery store and I'm fussing at my kids in the aisle, just know I will do the same thing with you if you screw up too. There's no difference. I'm going to talk to you in the same way. Don't be surprised, right? Because there's no gap between what you see in the aisle in your local grocery store for me as a local leadership trainer and what I write or what I put down. I will never ask somebody to do something as a person in leadership, and this is a principle, right, that you could take to the bank. I will never ask somebody to do something as a person in a leadership position that I would not do myself. And I am committed to that all the way if I'm an authentic leader.
This isn't exactly aligned with where you are, but you brought up isn't exactly along the conversation that you're making, that the point you're making right now, but you did bring up parenting, fatherhood, leaders at home. You go back and forth because it is holistic. So we have different coaches and people that help people do things that are needed, and some of that is parenting and divorce. There's different needs that people have, and we talk about in parenting, you want to be authentic. Let's say authentic here, and teaching your kids, you want to show them some of, maybe not all of them, but you want to show them some of your scars, and show that, hey, dad, in my case, dads come back from this, because that's a lesson in itself. Because whenever they have a scar, which they will, they'll have some things that happen. So just pushing through that authenticity part. I thought that was I didn't come up with that. One of the guests did as a point, and it stuck with me. I thought that was a good point to add to what you're talking about, right?
Well, and I would say, in addition to that, just to sort of add on or layer in, think about it this way. If you're a leader in a workplace, everything you learned about leadership started in your family of origin. Everything. Family is another tweetable quote I'm about to give you. Family is the world's first organizational development laboratory.
Hold on. I just got a voice in my ear. Can you continue? Oh, wait.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
So
I was pretending something and I accidentally turned on another tape. So I had voices in my head.
you had voices in your head. You got to watch out for that.
I do. I hope it doesn't continue after the show ends. Could you go with Jeff here? Get me out of this issue.
Absolutely. Let me get you. Let me rescue you. Let me come to your rescue here.
Please.
So
be more professional.
Why do good leaders sometimes create bad systems? Jeff, this is a great question. I love this one. Good leaders sometimes create bad systems because they're leading accidentally. They're leading with their brain off. They're not leading intentionally, right? Now, is it really hard to lead intentionally, Jeff? Yes, it is. It is a 24-hour, sometimes feels like 365-day a year, always on process, right? But we have historical examples, of good leaders who created bad systems because they were unintentional in their behavior. Classic example of this from literature is Julius Caesar, right? So if you look at the Shakespeare play, Julius Caesar, I encourage every leader to read that because Caesar does everything right in the Roman context in that play. And the way Shakespeare writes it, he is a good leader, not a leader that we would maybe call good in 21st century America, but in Rome at that time, he is framed as being a good leader in the classical sense of being good.
Very true.
Yet Shakespeare winds up assassinated. Why is that? Well, because he made the way the play is written, he made one bad decision. He failed to listen to good advice from his wife to not go down to the Senate, and he went down to the Senate anyway. And one of the great phrases that is in that play, and I use this with good leaders all the time, is Caesar says to his wife, "Of course I'm going to go to the Senate. Always, everywhere, all the time, I am Caesar." That's intentional leadership. I'm always on. I don't get a break. There's no point in time where I get to go down and not be a leader. Now, in our time, 2000 plus years later, we look at that and we go, my gosh, like he must have been repressed, or like his wife must have been some problem in their marriage, or gosh, that guy Brutus was really terrible, or the system really failed Caesar. No, he was a good leader. But because he lost focus for just a moment, and this is what Shakespeare is trying to show us, because he lost focus for a moment, he wound up laying the grails, planting the seed for a bad system that would eventually result in, come knock on him, but also result in the death of a lot of other people and create the Roman Empire that we now know today. So anyway, why do leaders sometimes create bad systems? Because they're not intentional. They're leading too accidentally.
All right, so let's stay here for a second, and you kind of went around the rim of how you instruct people and what that looks like. Do you mind? I assume you don't. Do you mind taking a little bit of a view at that and what that framework looks like? And say I gave you a call, how would our interaction come together? And kind of just not 30 minutes here, but give me a shot. Tell me what you got.
Yeah. So if Rodd calls me, or Jared, or Jeff, or Joey, or Lori, or anybody who's in the chat right now, if any of you were to give me a call or reach out to me on LinkedIn, one of the first things that I would do is I would sit with you and try to find out who you are as a person. What are your deepest dreams? What is your vision of leadership? And we start very small, right? What do you want our time together to accomplish? Because fundamentally, while I have all these ideas and beliefs, and while I expound on them and why I advocate for them, I have to meet you where you're at to get you to where it is you want to go. And if I don't meet you where you're at, I can't get you where it is you want to go. And so if you're at a spot where, hey, son, I just got to solve this problem. Let's go back to the three people who are working with you. I've just got to solve this problem with three people who are demotivated. Can we solve this problem today? The answer is yes. I can give you all kinds of tips, tricks, ideas, thinking about motivation. Here's some tactical things you can do. Here's an overall strategy for motivation. And by the way, After we get done with that initial conversation, we'll have a plan. We will probably meet anywhere between 4 to 6 times. We'll have a great holistic conversation.
Overall?
By the way,
4 to 6 times
overall.
Okay.
And what we will do is we will solve that motivation problem. In the process of solving that problem, here's what is going to be revealed. More of your leadership challenges are going to start to come up because your problem is not really motivation. Just like your problem is really not conflict between people or a toxic culture, which is in our next comment here. I can't wait to get to this one. Yeah, your problem really isn't with those things. Your problem is whatever is going on underneath those things. And can we get to the root causes? Can we pull those things out? But you're not going to tell me what those are in our first meeting because you may not even be aware of them, particularly if you're leading accidentally. If you were promoted into a position because you were the best worker, congratulations, you're now number one because everybody else quit, which is, by the way, the vast majority of people when they come into a leadership position, get into that position because they were promoted into it, not because they had any formalized leadership training, not because they sat with a guy like me. And then a guy like me went to management and said, oh, yes, this person is worthwhile to be promoted. They have the particular skill sets, motivation, communication, influence, persuasion, discipline. They're able to build on trust. They've looked out for their biases. Nobody's asking me any of those questions before you get promoted. Instead, the organization hires a guy like me to come in and talk to you, Rodd, after you've been promoted. When you're hitting those minefields in all those areas and you can't get out.
That's a tough spot to be because it's win or fail. And it's not just to the people here because it's to the people that is on your team that you're gonna succeed or not succeed with. And if you're going right into landmines, and there's a lot of that, there's people probably on that team that were like, how did he get, or how did Rodd get there? He didn't deserve to, there's all sorts of things you've got to understand. Your level's next level, big time. And there's a big difference between this and that, especially your first management position, I would say, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, if you're not looking at your
huge gap.
Oh my gosh. There's a difference between supervision management and then other things, right? And so supervision and management both sit under the rubric of what we call leadership, right? In our modern organizational cultural context, right? Well, when we talk about management and supervision, those are two fundamentally different acts. Now, supervision can occur with a dash of management. And of course, management can always fall back into supervision, but those are two fundamentally different things. When we go into our first role, yes, when we go into our first role, like I've sat with many a supervisor, and the first question they say to me is, or the first question they'll ask me is, how do I solve a conflict between John and Paula? That's a supervisory question. That is not a management question. A management question is, how did John and Paula get into a conflict in the first place?
Bigger picture.
What was the environment that allowed John and Paula to actually get into the space where they are right now, which leads us into the question that we have here.
Yes.
What is the first sign of a toxic culture forming? There's many signs of toxic that you can point to that will indicate to you that a toxic culture is evident. But one of the biggest ones is this one. People aren't talking about the things they need to be talking about. Conflict happens, but it is poisonous, and it creates tribes, and it creates separation and disintegration of the team.
Tribes. That's a key one right there.
Tribes is the key word. And I don't mean in the sort of Seth Godin way of talking about tribes.
No.
I mean in the absolutely the negative way of talking about tribes, right? Where we're at each other's throats and we're talking about things that we shouldn't be talking about. We're involved in pretend conflict or escalating fake fights, escalating things that don't need to be escalated. We're running to HR all the time to solve problems that HR, quite frankly, can't solve. We are not talking about the things that matter because they're too hard, because the supervisor won't listen, or the management will ignore us, or we've been in that meeting before and dead silence has reigned when we've brought up this issue. One of the first signs of a toxic culture forming is the breaking of the culture into tribes.
You're going to love that question right there. What you were just talking about is exactly Kobe. Nice timing, dude. I saw that right as you were saying that. I was like, dude, that's the one right there next. Why do employees stay quiet under poor leadership? Well, you were just describing at least a part of that, right?
People stay quiet under poor leadership because people are conflict avoidant. And
they probably just flat out don't want to get in trouble, right?
Right. Or they feel like, or if I'm going to be really generous, they don't have the skill sets. They don't feel that they have the skill sets. They don't feel that they have the time, or even bigger, they don't want the accountability for outcomes if it goes sideways.
Yeah. Just like you described somebody sitting at a boardroom and bringing up this point again, and it fell on crickets. You said silence, crickets, right? That's and tie that to the toxic environment that the young lady was talking about just a second ago.
Absolutely.
Right there.
Yeah. So quietude, lack of accountability, lack of desire for accountability, or maybe here's another way. Maybe you're in a situation where you've brought up an issue before. You've pressed as much as you possibly can. Like I think of basketball and the full court press, right? Forget the NFL and the tush push. We're going to do the full court press, right? So we full court press right on this, and we solve the problem. And we get no thank yous. We get no appreciation. We get no recognition. We get no claps. Okay. We put ourselves out there. We got slings and arrows. And in exchange, to your point, Rodd, in exchange, we got crickets. We got dead silence. Too many failures of leadership really focus around that lack of ability to recognize, that lack of ability to acknowledge. Look, one of the things I tell folks is emotional intelligence is a very popular thing. I read Dan Goldman's book. I know his research. I love that book. I facilitated that book. I've taught that book. I've pulled that book apart. I've even looked at the research underneath that book, right? And you will learn more about how to emotionally and intelligently, and I did say emotionally and intelligently say thank you to your people for doing something that you would not have done yourself because you don't have the skill sets to do it. You will learn more from Jane Austen than you would learn from Dan Goldman. Go read Sense and Sensibility. It'll tell you how to thank those people.
Wow. Well, I think the books that you just talked about is how founders can avoid repeating leadership mistakes, right?
That's right. All of our mistakes, all of the things that we're trying to avoid have already been recorded. They've already been documented. And matter of fact, they've been documented at mass.
Pause you for a second. Can I pause you for a second? Let me add to this. There's a lot of leaders in the world, and the numbers probably not registered or known, but as a percentage, what do you think? In the opening, we talked about not being, founders are made to scale. This, that. Nobody's taught to lead people. So that's what we're sitting on right now. That's this topic, right? And as a percentage, how many percentage do you think 80% go and get training like you, or is it more like 5, 10, 20%?
I would say
for now.
Yes, for now. Yep. I would say in the vast, okay. So we've been studying formalized leadership since the 1950s in this country. It started in the U.S. Army coming out of World War II. And we then moved through the 1950s to the 1970s, where organizational behavior was studied by folks like the Gallup organization. And then finally, Peter Drucker, spat out his first book in the 1970s. We went through the 1980s and the 1990s with the rise of the .com companies and the turning on of the commercial internet, where more studies were done and more research was done. And then we come into the early 2000s.
So there's a lot of numbers. Go ahead. There's a lot of numbers.
The .com
good.
busts.
Good. This is good.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. We have military leaders that went through Iraq and Afghanistan, like Stanley McChrystal and General David Petraeus. And we have them write books about leadership. And out of all this book writing, out of all of this research, out of all of this information, the numbers are shockingly low. Under 20%. Under 20% of people take of organizational leaders take formalized leadership in any kind of meaningful way. And the number of organizations that formalize that into their actual structures. So you're making new leaders in a formalized system while you're also educating and elevating new old leaders, and you're creating succession plans. That's less than 5% of all organizations.
Wow.
Right now.
Now, here's an interesting thought, since you talked about the Kaizen system, which is where the military started, and the military's difference of back then and what our military is phenomenal. Whether you like them or not, the leadership, everything you just talked about, and it's a Japanese system, so it's got years of thousands, and we learned about it and got trained on it, and then just have been building and built. Now, the organizational system of the military, who's completely trained, and they live in that now, right? That's part of the system. It's a lived system. Now, it's not perfect, and there's all sorts of things that happen and this and that, but all the puzzle pieces and the infantry and the people and the dealing with death right in front of people and having them go back and do it again. That doesn't exist anywhere, but all of that put together to make your point about somebody should come and get trained by you. I'm biased right now by you. And because look at the difference of basically every company, no matter how good they are, they're not to that level.
No.
The comparison is 10,000% different. I made up that number, obviously. 10,000% difference in everything you're talking about right now, which all leads to efficiency.
Exactly. If you want to look at, so I love the Kaizen approach, right? Continuous improvement, right? What are the ways we can move and shift and change and adjust, right? Kaizen really focuses on changing small things. Because of the Japanese system that it comes out of, which, by the way, a great book. If you don't know anything about Kaizen, if you want to read a great book that's sort of the great-great-grandfather of Kaizen and sort of led into this system, Miyamoto Musashi's A Book of Five Rings. Miyamoto Musashi was a swordsman.
I've heard of that. I heard of that. Go ahead. I'm sorry. I heard of that, though.
He was a swordsman in, I believe it was 15th or 16th century Japan. This guy was... You think about Bruce Lee, who was Chinese. He's basically the Japanese version of Bruce Lee. Back in the day, I mean, the guy would go out and he would engage in sword fighting towards the end of his career after he'd, killed a lot of people and broken a lot of things. But he would go out and engage in sword fighting and would challenge people just with like wooden sticks, and then would just beat people with wooden sticks. He was just that good at his art, right? He was that good at his skill set. And so what you find out is, when you look at A Book of Five Rings, what he did, by the way, he went into a cave, he put down his sword, went into a cave, wrote his book on a scroll, and then died, right? That was his last act, was to write down everything he knew about sword fighting, right? You would think that this would be a book about sword fighting, but in reality, it is a book about adjusting, tiny adjustments, making changes along the way in leadership that can help you engage in this process of continuous improvement. And he talks honestly about how he engaged with discipline, how he incorporated feedback, where he got that feedback from, how he avoided toxicity, how he managed to unlearn old habits, how he set the tone, not only for himself, but also for others who were following him. He does all of this in this book. And it's a great book for a leader to have. I would strongly recommend it. It's actually better than Sun Tzu. Sun Tzu's Art of War is really more tactical. Miyamoto Musashi's A Book of Five Rings is about the strategy. It's about how you actually adjust your mindset and your thinking in order to be an effective leader.
Hassan, I got to ask you a question. Are you cheating? Are you looking ahead at the questions that are coming up? Because you
No.
just set up the next 5 or 6 questions. Bing, 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 bing. And
No.
by that book description, I mean, starting here, how do leaders encourage honest feedback safely? It's a little bit of a pivot. It looks like we have some leaders here that are feeling a little guilty now. We were identifying workplaces. Now we've got some people here saying, well, I better find this out.
How do you encourage honest feedback safely? So first off, we have to understand what safety actually is. Okay.
I was going to ask that.
Yeah. Now I've read Amy Edmondson's book on psychological safety, and I agree with a lot of the points that she makes around psychological safety. I also agree with the assumption that she makes around psychological safety, which is that we have moved in our work culture from physical material safety, because we are a post-technology, post-blue collar, and that is changing a little bit, but we're still post-blue collar work environment in the United States of America. So a lot of what she talks about is really useful for us in the United States of America. Now, globally, I don't know how that scales, right? But here, it's really useful because of the kinds of work that we do and the transition we've made in our economy over the last 50 years. Okay. Psychological safety is interesting. If you want to encourage psychological safety, the easiest way to do this is to actually be honest yourself with folks. Now, does that mean being completely and totally transparent and engaging what's called what used to be called open book management? Open book management comes fraught with its own difficulties, right? But, and I am saying but there are things in open book management that can encourage honest feedback. However, here's the thing. If we're going to get into an environment where we're encouraging honest feedback, we have to be willing as leaders to take on feedback without engaging in defensiveness ourselves. That's the easiest way to create the kind of psychological safety that encourages honest feedback. Are you willing to take in feedback without defensiveness, without going into a defensive posture, without saying things like, oh, well, but, and oh, well, and, or you don't know the entire story, right? Instead, getting feedback from your people, taking in that feedback, saying, I didn't know that it was this way. Thank you for giving me feedback. Now, do I have permission to give you some feedback? Do I have permission to come back to you? And by the way, we can also pause in this process and take a step away and say, as leaders, I have to go away and deal with this. I have to go because I'm too emotional right now, but I will come back to you and I will have a follow-up conversation with you. And then, by the way, what we do as leaders at a practical level is we schedule our follow-up conversation as one of the things on our to-do list before 5 o'clock on a Friday.
Friday of that same week, you mean?
Friday of that same week. That's right. Yep.
So it's kind of like the first part of what you were saying. I relate to you've got to in parenting. I'm going to use that as another metaphor. You show them some of your scars, maybe not all of them, and that allows that open managing reference you made, that open book. Sorry, that allows for that thought of somebody to say, oh, wow, okay, I can approach, in my case, him or her, right? And then the bigger part, I think, once that person approaches you, don't lose all that and more by going, hey, wait a minute, you don't, and getting defensive. That's the balance there, right?
Well, and this is all part of candor too, right? So remember I was talking about the 3 C's earlier, right? Yeah. It's more than just clarity from them to me. It's clarity from me to them. One of the key questions that I ask leaders, and this is a challenge for everybody in the comments section, I would encourage you, if you're listening, if you're watching, and you want to comment on this, this is a basic question for you as a leader. How clearly do you think? Now, pause on this question and really think about it. How clearly do you think? Because George Orwell pointed out in his great essay on English on the English language. It was published, gosh, back in like 1940 something. Politics in the English language. I can't remember what year it was published, but you could go Google that and look it up. It's free, by the way, on all over the place. Project Gutenberg, everywhere. You can go grab this. And one of the points that Orwell makes is he says that our language, and this was back in the 1940s, our language is, he says, declining. It's part of the overall decline that we are experiencing, and we just sort of accept it. And the bigger point he makes is, if our language is declining, if what we're saying is slovenly or is not to par or is not sharp and clear, then it should not surprise us that our thoughts are slovenly as well. Think about the time in which we live. How many of us as leaders are thinking clearly? Not asking the right questions, that's a secondary act. Not even saying the right things in memos, that's another act. How many of us are thinking clearly? And by the way, here's an example of a leader who actually was thinking clearly. So there was a CEO of Nokia phones a few years ago who wrote a memo called a burning platform memo. That is probably the clearest example of executive leadership thinking I've ever read, because he took an idea from something that he had seen in the world. He clearly applied the lesson to something that was going on with Nokia in their competition around Apple, around the iPhone, right? And then he called out his own people and said, we need to engage in XYZ thing. That is an example of clear thinking, followed up by clear language, which was then followed up by clear writing. And by the way, all of that failed anyway, because no matter how clearly he communicated it, it still wasn't clear enough. So here's the question for you. And by the way, he's not at fault because it failed. He may be at fault because of other reasons, but he was not at fault because it failed. How clear is your thinking? I would love to see to find out if folks are commenting on that in the chat. I see a question here. When should managers unlearn old leadership habits? So, Rodd,
right out of the gate, man. Immediately. That's when you should, whether that happens or not. But that clear thinking you're talking about now is part of that. I see where I'm not hitting that, and that clear thinking to a lesser level than what you were talking about with Nokia, but it's, just as important. That clear thinking needs to get in there, and you got to start unthinking this stuff now, because what did you say? 80%, all the way down to 5%, depending on what the topics that you added to it are that who aren't trained, and it can't be an exuberant investment that's beyond. Oh, by the way, don't forget, and we're not done yet, but don't forget to put in the private chat the contact information for you that you prefer. But it can't be a ridiculous thing that a 10-employee company couldn't deal with, right?
Yeah, I think look, we have a very simple tool that leaders have used throughout the course of history in order to unlearn old leadership habits, in order to get a hold of their thinking, in order to communicate with clarity, and also, quite frankly, to begin the process of leading as a holistic, organic person. And this one tool, we've actually, weirdly enough, in the last 25 years as leadership, and as leadership trainers and developers, we've actually abandoned this tool, and it's kind of shocking to me. The one tool that leaders have had through history is the tool of journaling. Journaling is critical. I've never read about a leader, either historically or even up to probably about the last 25 years, who didn't engage in the practice of journaling. Now, you don't have to have a daily journaling practice. You don't even have to have a weekly journaling practice, but a journaling practice of some kind allows you to begin to develop the tools to begin to unlearn old leadership habits, to begin to engage in the process of growing in self-awareness and in empathy for others. It allows you to explore your own motivation, and it allows you to do that in, we talked about psychological safety earlier, a safe place, right? Your journal should be private. Your journal should be something to yourself. Matter of fact, I tell leaders all the time, go down to your local, I'm going to say the name of a bookstore here. Go down to Barnes & Noble, okay? Go get the 3-pack of the Moleskine notebooks. Get a pen or a pencil. If you want to erase, you can get a pencil. If you are feeling more brave and you're not really worried about it, go get a pen and open up your journal and start a journaling practice. Now, we have journaling practices obviously pushed in like the self-help or the lifestyle coaching industry.
No, I've heard that. I've heard that over and over and over again. Successful. I mean, look at Leonardo da Vinci constantly journaling, right? That process is, and I hear it in these classes all the time. Absolutely, journaling is critical. I just wanted to interject that. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah, journaling is absolutely critical. And I think that, most people, no, I'm here. Most folks, like I said, don't engage actively with journaling. And I think that that's something that we need to get back to, right? By the way, a journal doesn't have to be a public thing. Matter of fact, it shouldn't be a public thing. Journaling should be private to you. And again, I'm not telling you to do anything that I haven't done myself. I have my own journals. Actually, I have a whole series of journals. If you were going to my house, and if you were to walk into my house, I have a library of all kinds of books. As you can imagine, I'm quite well read, as are my kids. It's literally the first room that you walk into. Yeah, exactly. Nice. And then if you wound through my house, right, you would see bookshelves all over the place, and there's books all over. It's kind of like that scene in Good Will Hunting, except my wife doesn't let me stack books on the floor. She has me. We've moved past that a little bit.
By the way, beautiful, but
beautiful. Oh, absolutely. And so you would go if you went into my bedroom, you would see a shelf that has a number of books on it that I consider to be my sort of outlier books, right? The ones I really show people that I really trust. And then in a very little corner right there, there's an entire collection of journals going back many years. And I can take these journals and I can look at them and I can research them and I can go back and look at what I was doing before. And I can see where I had successes and failures, right? I can also see where I had struggles. I can see where I'm falling into the same pit over and over again. And I could also see where I'm striving and moving forward up the mountain, because everything isn't always negative. Sometimes things in leadership are very, very positive and very, very uplifting. And I need to be able to see that too as a leader.
Yeah, I mean, in anything. I mean, you see the results of what you're doing, what your mission is. You see those results come through. It's very rewarding. I mean, it can also be obviously additional boost in your own personal family revenue, which is standing on your feet is never a bad thing. Yeah, I can totally see that. Now let's flip it a little bit. Okay. How does ego damage team performance? Which I can imagine, obviously, the obvious things, but are there deeper than what I would come off with in the top of my head? Deeper levels.
So ego is an interesting word, right? I've been really sort of thinking about this quite deeply recently. And so I'm going to give you some thoughts off the top of my head that I didn't put in my book. And that I haven't yet explored on my podcast. So you're hearing it here first, right? These are some first thoughts from Jesan around ego. And I'll start with a story. This is kind of a little bit good way to enter into this, right? How I'm coming to these thoughts. So as a leader, not only a leader in my businesses, but also a leader in my family, I do all kinds of developmental things. And one of the developmental things I do is I'm in a Sunday book group with fellow Christians, and we meet after church and we talk about a particular book and we read this book. And the book that we're currently reading is Mere Christianity by C.S. Lewis, a book that I actually have covered on the show. And we're working our way through the book and getting insights from it. And there's a chapter in there called The Great Sin. And C.S. Lewis talks about the sin of pride. Now put a pin in that. He identifies it as the great sin. Now put a pin in that for just a minute. I also am involved in martial arts. I've been involved in martial arts off and on for many, many years. I also played rugby for a lot of years. I know I don't look like it on the video.
Oh, so did I.
Me. Oh, okay, good.
I played rugby. I was an international coach. My kids all played rugby.
Oh, excellent. So I was a winger. I was either 7 or 14. I was one of those guys. I was out on or 11 to 14. So I was out on the wing. Those are my numbers. And I did some coaching as well, a little bit for USA Rugby. And had a good time. I love that sport. But
it is a great sport.
Oh my gosh, it's incredible.
As
right
a matter of fact, my oldest son scored the first try of his age. He'd go to Europe and play over there on this team that he was on. And he scored his first try over there. And I think it was the youngest that at that time anyway, I don't know, he's 40 now, but, and he had to drink beer out of a boot, right?
Yes. Love rugby culture. I love it. Oh my gosh.
Yes, it's the best.
It's the best. No, that's congratulations to your son. That's awesome. So I played rugby for a lot of years, did martial arts, and currently I'm in jiu-jitsu, right? And if my wife were here, she'd be hitting me on the shoulder because I always mention jiu-jitsu at least once every conversation. It drives her absolutely crazy. But one of the things that jiu-jitsu is teaching me, and I've only been doing it for a few years now. I'm still at the beginning of the process. I'm nowhere close to my black belt. I'm not anywhere close to that. But one of the things that jiu-jitsu teaches you at a physical level is how to overcome and how to navigate pride, or what they call it in jiu-jitsu, ego. So the question is, these are your 2 pinpoints, right? So the question is, how does ego damage team performance? Well, a leader's ego or a leader's pride, such as it were, if they haven't learned how to be humble, either physically, spiritually, emotionally, acts as a corrosive cancer on the team. And these are just my first thoughts, right? And so we call it ego. We say, oh, well, you've got to kill the ego, or you've got to remove the ego. But what we really want to say is, we recognize that you have pride. We recognize that you've not been humble as a leader. And that lack of humility, that pride, doesn't allow the team to move forward. It acts as a barrier on team performance. It acts as a block on team performance. This ties into another idea I've long had, that the biggest problem sometimes, you talked about scaling and about startups, the biggest problem sometimes in a startup, and one of the other things I do is advise startups, the biggest problem there is the founder themselves. It's not the product, it's not the process, it's not the team, it's not the service, it's not the VC. The biggest problem, the biggest barrier to scaling is the founder. What
did you just say? Did you say you buy startups, or you train startups? So you said that real quick and I missed it.
Sure. So I work with and I coach startups in one of my other businesses. Yeah. And
that makes sense, because there's a lot of this right here. There's a lot of this because they're just developing the culture. I think all startups, that's got to be a high number of what you're talking about right now.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And ego can pop up in a lot of different places. Ego can pop up in, I do this better than other folks, so I'm just going to keep doing it. Ego can pop up in, I control the money and I have to know what the budget is. Ego can pop up in, I know how to hire people better than the person that I hired to hire people. We have to figure out how to kill our pride. We have to figure out how to kill our ego. We have to figure out how to get humble. And so I'm taking the things that I'm learning in jiu-jitsu, and I'm taking the books that I'm reading, and I'm trying to merge them together into a larger thought, because I think ego just scrapes the top of this issue and of this challenge. It actually doesn't go all the way down deep to the root causes.
No, absolutely. That and it's funny how those sports in general teaches, and that's why I think it's important for some degree, at least. Mm-hmm. Children should take sports, because there's a lesson there. It's not just you're getting rid of the kids. You're learning lessons. You're learning failure. You're learning if you're in the right sports program or whatever. And you parents don't go overboard with that whole idea, because there's the helicopter parent, right? But let's talk about Lanrick here. What's one leadership habit? And then I'm going to have you read a few comments because I think you're going to enjoy these. What's
Sure.
one leadership habit that causes silent burnout? I love this.
I would say the one leadership habit that probably causes the most silent burnout is a lack of appropriate recognition and reward beyond money.
Oh yeah.
Case in point,
Yeah,
I'll use
that
an
makes a
example to
lot of
back this up. Okay. I'll use an example to back this up. So I once watched a biography of Walt Disney on Amazon Prime, right? I can't remember the name of the biography. It doesn't matter. Walt Disney was a brilliant animator, but Walt
Yes.
Disney, as an animator and even as a business person, but let's just focus on the animator part. As an animator, Walt Disney was one of those leaders, and I resonate with this because for many years I was this kind of leader who wasn't driven by getting recognition and reward and thank you. He was driven by the work.
Mm-hmm.
As the Disney studios began to grow, and this is in that period between the time when he created Cinderella and Sleeping Beauty and Bambi, those iconic, Pinocchio, those iconic animated movies, right? That Disney is currently doing everything they can to destroy the legacy of. Anyway, don't get me started on that. That's a whole other thing over there. Don't get me started on that.
Oh my God. No. They are absolutely bizarre. Now I hear the woke is kind of shifting, but there's still a whole bunch of films like Cinderella that just came out that they still got to go through. So I think that problem's fixed, but I don't know.
Well, there's a lot of stuff in the pipe. Let's just leave it at that.
That's the problem. It's like cars, right? They're designed 5, 8, 10 years ahead. Same with films. They don't happen in 24 hours. So there's still some more crap coming down the line, but
there is. But Walt Disney, in that period of time when he was making all of those great animated movies, those classics, right? That I still show my kids, by the way. I have the original DVDs of a lot of those.
Nice.
Well, when he was doing that, the animators who were working with him, and he was building a team, he was scaling, right? The animators who were working with him were getting more and more frustrated in working with Walt Disney. And one of them told a story about how Walt would walk past their work, right? And he would look over their shoulder, and the only thing he would say, and this is how you knew he liked the work, the only thing he would say was a grunt. He would go, And then if you looked over your shoulder.
Oh, that's horrible.
Yes. And then if you looked over your shoulder and he didn't say anything, he looked over your shoulder and said nothing, you knew you were in trouble. And these animators were interviewed in this documentary. And you know what they said? They said the reason that later on in the 1950s, when Walt Disney was starting to build and come up with his plan for Walt Disney Studios, the reason why they unionized wasn't because Walt Disney didn't pay them enough. He did. The reason they unionized was because they didn't get a thank you. They didn't get recognition. And that's what they wanted. And I watched this biography. This was years ago. And I sat in my living room and I was shocked into stunned silence because I had been saying this for years. I had been approaching recognition and reward in this way. Look, as a leader, if you have a habit of not thanking people because you think money is the reward, like that clip in Mad Men that floats around everywhere on Instagram, that's fine, but you better say thank you at some point for an idea, for a challenge being overcome. And you better say thank you early and often, because otherwise what you're doing is you're creating a toxic culture with resentment underneath it. And by the way, you're also creating a culture that causes silent burnout, or that can lead to silent burnout.
And you need to be authentic. And what's your word?
Clarity. You need to be authentic and candid, actually. Candid. You need to be candid.
In doing that, you can't have somebody go, okay, thank you.
Well,
Hey,
and
I want you-
it also doesn't matter. This is one last point. If you're a
Well, it's
leader
better if
listening
it's
to this
not.
today, if you're a leader listening to this today and you're like, well, I don't need thank yous. I'm just driven by doing good work.
Oh,
Cool
okay,
on
yeah.
you. That's cool
Yeah.
on you. I have empathy for you. I'm driven by doing good work too. I need another challenge. I finish one thing and then I move on to the next thing. I don't need a thank you, but recognizing that other people do is a sign of intentional leadership. It is one of the practices that intentional leaders do.
And I'll circle around you. I'll put a Kevlar vest around that statement in that I'd be willing to bet that at least a very high number of those leaders that say that if somebody of leadership or somewhere else came to them and go, oh my God, dude, Rodd, that was unbelievable. Dude, you know what? You did an awesome job on that. I bet you it would affect them, and in a good way. All right, I want you to read some comments.
Yeah. All right.
Gerard asked, he asked one of the earliest questions. I remember. Go ahead.
Yes. Gerard says, love this perspective. Leadership really sets the tone. Thanks, Gerard.
It does. It does. So you need both, but you got to have the tone set. Go ahead.
Absolutely.
Jeffrey
Jeffrey Bowman says, thank you for tackling real workplace issues. Absolutely. We try to keep it real here because there's real people with real problems. Let's see. John Uche, I hope I'm saying that right, says, Jesan's insights are incredibly practical.
That's why I love this show, because people like you bring stuff like this to this show and to our audience, and the audience responds obviously pretty well and appreciative and searching, because that's what this great middle class is all about. Why don't you, is there anything that we're already at an hour and almost 20 minutes.
Yeah.
That went by pretty quick.
It did.
Still same number of people, right around 300 in here. And so what do you want to leave them with? And then I'll throw you back in the green room, which obviously is no way possible I could do that, and then I'll do a wrap up and come meet you back there.
Okay. I promise, number one, I promise not to eat the green peanut M&Ms in the green room. I promise to leave those alone.
This is a good day. This is a good day.
I know that Axel back there from Guns N' Roses, I know he was eyeing him. So I know he's up next. So you might want to tell him to watch out.
You got the reference, brother. You got the reference. Good job. Woo! Nailed it. Oh,
that guy's a little shady. Just watch out for him. He's a little bit of a shady gangster.
But here's the thing. You're absolutely correct. But he's one of producer Barbie's favorites. So okay. I may not get in trouble for that one. Hopefully.
Well, you have producer Barbie come and talk to me. It's okay. She can send all of her angry emails to me. It's okay.
Witness.
That's right. First off, Rodd, I want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk to your folks today on your show. This has been an amazing and a spectacular experience. You're doing great work here, and I want to personally encourage you to keep on doing this, because I firmly believe that doing things like this, doing a show like this, having interactions like this with people like me and many others across the fruited plain is what's actually going to lead into, and in all sincerity, I believe this, lead into the next golden age that is upcoming in America. I know we can't see it right now. I know that if we're perpetually online, it looks like there's chaos everywhere and nothing is being resolved and we can't fix it, but we can, and we always have, and we will do it again. And it shows like this, and guys like Rodd and myself and every one of you out there, all 300 of you, you're doing the work every day, the work of leadership that is going to create the next golden age, even if you can't see it right now. We have to start on the journey before we can see the end. So, Rodd, thank you.
That is beautiful. You're welcome, and thank you. Why don't you give everybody a big wave? I'll meet you up in the green room after I wrap up out here.
Awesome.
All right, brother. That was perfect, man. That was an awesome show. That was something that. Oh, and I think the golden age that you, Jesan, that you're talking about. I reference what I call a lot of people know the term utopia. And I think AI has a lot to do with that. And one thing we didn't get into Maybe we can do a follow-up show because this was a beautiful show. But AI, in the world of AI, how is leadership going to change in the respects that you're talking about? Because we talk about AI a lot on this show, building the community on AI for old guys like me. But anyway, hey, you know, like I was saying, thank you so much. I appreciate that conversation, not just for the insights, but for the way you framed leadership as something lived, practiced, and owned. Not something we outsource or to titles or policies. What you shared today matters because it doesn't let leadership hide behind good intentions. It reminds us that systems, well, they always teach, right? And people always learn. Now, is that the right way or the wrong things? Whether we mean them or not. To everyone watching or listening, if this conversation made you pause, rethink your role, or see your organization differently, that isn't accidental. That's what happens when clarity replaces comfort. If you want more of this, deeper conversations, written reflections, and ideas that don't disappear when the episode ends, well, I invite you to join us on Substack, insightstraighttalk.substack.com. We publish that 3 days a week. Yeah, we're right now at 3 days a week. Plus, I do a column in the Mangum News. But we have Barbieisms on Monday. We have pages and poems, part of my book. Hey, oh, you got the information on there. Actually, folks, let me pause here for a second. I want to get that copied in there. I forgot to ask you again, Jesan. Hold on. Sorry, folks. I was really building up there too. I screwed up my timing here. Let me go to comments and let me go here. Paste it. And as I'll say again a little bit later as we close out, please Please contact Jesan and at his email address there, LinkedIn address there. And dang, LinkedIn dropped out today. I knew that was the extra because LinkedIn's really important. But you know, let's get you under our Substack, you know, where the thinking continues. And make sure you're subscribed to that, as well as our YouTube channel at Rodd Duff 1939. That's where all the archives are. The full archive lives there, and where this community keeps growing. Now, if you're a business, an organization, or a leader who aligns with what we're doing here, yes, we do have a small number of partnerships and sponsorship opportunities available. We keep that very limited because we don't want to, quote unquote, water that down, right? I don't want to spend 15 minutes in commercials, rather keep, you know, several. And then we interject as well as video into it. We're intentionally about who and what topics we work with, right? Not that there's any one better or the other, but we have a lane. We have 4 lanes actually, but we have a lane we're working for, and that's the great middle class of America. We partner with people who believe leadership matters, education matters, and conversations like this belong in the public square. If that's you, please reach out. And finally, thank you again to our sponsors and partners. The Mangum City Library. Sorry, this has been a long day today. And of course, Leaf Lab and the Regeneration School Project. We're really moving on that now. And then, of course, Voices at the Table for helping making these conversations possible. Until next time, my friends, stay curious, stay accountable, okay? Wave to somebody and keep showing up. This is Insights and Straight Talk. I am your host, Rodd Duff, and stay after the outro. You'll see Producer Barbie here in a second. I always try and do something goofy at the end. But with that, as I always like to say, I am out.
Before you leave, if you'd like to watch another one of the podcasts, click the first link in the description. We love having you here and we appreciate all your support.
And with that, Producer Barbie and I are out. Leadership matters.